I mean, farmers are bringing their prices down. It's not reflected at the checkout. I guess grocers are somewhat using their power to dominate farmers here. What are you hoping to get from the inquiry?
Well, for us at the farm gate, we're not necessarily seeing what's being represented in the supermarket or grocery shelves. So that is the basis of why we support the inquiry. And what farmers would like to see is some meaningful results out of this inquiry, because we have had numerous inquiries into the grocery sector. The ACCC has done one recently and had some excellent recommendations, especially around the code of what farmers and grocers use to set up their contracts, which is a voluntary code, and the recommendation was to make that mandatory. So that is one of the key components that we want this inquiry to look at, to make sure that farmers are receiving a good price, that the terms and conditions can't be negotiated away in any contracts, that there is penalties if people don't abide by the code, and that there are also farmers able to negotiate better terms as well, so that we are put on an even setting, because in Australia, in our supply chain, there is large organisations now that farmers have to negotiate with that don't necessarily have the farmers' best interests at heart.
I mean, it's a very fine balance between the cost price squeeze on the average Australian and then also fair price on agriculture too. What kind of impact is this having on the farming sector? We know we've heard from the fruit and veggie sector as well, but right across the farming industry, how long possibly can farmers sustain these kind of conditions?
Well, farmers are frustrated that they're not seeing, once again, the prices that are received at the consumer end, the retail end, back at the farm gate end. And there is no real pull or push through that supply chain equation so that farmers can get some clear transparency of what crops they should be growing, how much they should be growing, when they should be growing it. Yes, there are some stable contracts that the big retailers do offer, but that's only to a select few. It's the smaller producers, those smaller farmers that are actually frustrated by this process. And not only with the supermarkets, but also along the supply chain. We believe that there are many players that go from the farm gate to the grocery store, and they also need to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And if supermarkets are perceivably doing what they should be doing, we should then move further down that chain and ask the question, who is clipping the ticket, how are they clipping the ticket, and by how much? Because we all understand that everyone needs to have some profit to be viable, to be sustainable. But how much is enough, and how much should that be transferred to the farmers, and or should consumers be paying less in this circumstance where it's very expensive at the checkout point?
Particularly when inflation is on the downward turn now. David, I wanted to ask you about far north Queensland and how the floods are impacting produce there. We heard from the Prime Minister earlier today, and Stephen Miles, the Premier of Queensland too, speaking about the difficulty at the moment because those floods have impacted critical roads into farmlands, essentially making it impossible to get from paddock to plate. Where's that at the moment?
Well, at the moment, as people might be well aware, farmers have gone out and understand a little bit more about how much impact that they will have on their production. So we have lost crop, we have lost production, we have lost animals in this very intense storms. But then the ones that are remaining, the produce that is remaining to get to the supermarket shelves, to get to down that supply chain, is severely curtailed when we don't have access to roads, to telecommunications, and even to electricity, because these are the fundamentals to not only run a business, but then also run those supply chain industries. Once again, if the power goes out, you can't keep your produce refrigerated, which means it spoils. So there is a huge pressure to not only reinstate those supply lines in the far north Queensland, but then also for farmers to be able to get back and salvage what they can out of the crops, their livestock that is currently there, and get back onto their feet, because unfortunately they've gone through trying times. We have had very severe drought in Queensland for numerous years, and this to happen on top of that makes it incredibly difficult for those producers. And what we're saying is, if you have the opportunity as a consumer and you do know somebody on the land, make sure you give them a call and see how they're going for starters. But secondly, by buying Australian, you are supporting those farmers. You are doing your little bit to ensure that we've got a strong domestic market. And that means that that baseline, that ability for us to be able to sell produce is there.